Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of PTR Perspective. We are starting a new series where we are talking with PTR senior researchers and analysts who are working on the background, developing all the research that you see as output published from PTR's different channels. And today, our first guest is Saifa Khalid, who leads our Power Grid research team. She leads a team of 6 researchers focusing on different topics within Power Grid. Welcome to the podcast, Saifa.
Thank you so much, Sakib. Pleasure to be here and looking forward to a wonderful discussion.
Safa, you were one of the very first team members that we hired in PTR. And it's, I can say that with full confidence that pretty much all the research methodology that you've developed within Power Grid, you have either been a part directly or indirectly of that research. And it has been a journey of more than 8 years now. So, how do you feel about it?
I would say like it's very transformative journey. Like I have seen PTR evolve, evolution as well, like moving from a team of just 2 to 3 people to now we are like 40 people conducting research on different topics. We have seen the evolution of the research methods as well. Now, I would say that our structure policies are more structured. We have more better research method on place. So yeah, like I would say, this very transformation journey for me overall, at professional level as well and on personal level as well.
So it's interesting that you brought up methodology and using our skill set to improve the methodology of research over time. This is one of the core reasons why PTR was set up. You must have presented yourself PTR's 3 laws that we always talk about, and over there we talk about obviously transparency, but the diligence is an important topic, and hence the majority of our team members, if we have, come from a technical background, and that's the mix that we wanted to have in our team, where we bring technical expertise to let's say universe of market research, because that's what we thought was lacking. And you yourselves come from a technical background. You have a master's in electrical engineering, right? So why did you choose this space, and how do you think that you're able to use your expertise, your knowledge onto this field of market research?
Yeah, to be honest, I do come from a technical background. I have electrical engineering degree, but like initially when I opted this degree, I was of the view that I'd go to the fields and do some purely engineering jobs. But like stepping into the research, like it has I would say that it has sparked the curiosity in me, and I have started to enjoying this work. So, coming from the technical background, I would say that it helps me a lot conducting the market research, especially because like it's not just the market research, especially for the power grid, is not just about how people buy or sell the things. It's more about the dynamics, how grid is changing, how different technologies are evolving. So, coming from the electrical engineering background or technical background, I would say that I'm more able to connect with the clients on the other side of the table because they speak mostly the technical language. When I know the background, I know the terminologies, I can easily connect with them, I can understand their language, what they are trying to say. And that helps in conducting the research more efficiently and effectively, I would say.
I mean, that's the feedback that we have received from many of our clients directly, right? That since you're able to speak the language, I think that makes a big difference. And then not only that, but also our ability to embed all this knowledge in the methodology for research. I think that definitely sets us apart. In terms of the topic, please go ahead. You will.
I would say that it builds trust as well. Like you understand their language. What do they mean by side for instance, or pick how they see the semiconductors evolving. So if you understand their language, you understand what they are trying to what they are trying to answer, or which question is more triggering from for them. I would say that build trust and credibility as a researcher as well.
And how do you see, Saifa, the topics of research changing over time? Because if I go back, how many years? 12 years, when I was actually a researcher, the very first topic that I worked on in that time was all about renewables impact on the power grid. Actually, that's why PTR was formed, because there were so many changes happening in the grid, around the grid as well, right? So electrification in different sectors, decarbonization in different sectors. Uh, how do you see the change in terms of the research requirements, the topics evolving? There was obviously e-mobility, electrification in the transport sector became a major topic, right? Then digitalization in the grid infrastructure, that became an important topic, right? How do you see that evolution? And what are the top three trends or topics, if you were to choose within power grid, that you feel that are really changing the landscape of power grid?
Yeah. So you have mentioned that the things have changed drastically over the past few years. So, like if I talk about the topics, the major themes which are very dominant right now in the grid, I would say the digitalization. Few years back, there was no concept of, you could say, the digital equipment, digital things like. But now everybody is asking about the digital switchgear, for instance, or digital transformer, because digitalization is not just the need right now. It's you could say like it's the most critical element that needs to be embedded in the grid, because like you need more control over the protection, over altogether. You mentioned the renewables as well. So renewables, penetration of renewables at the lower end of the grid, you could say like at the consumer end, that's shaking everything. You could say like the grid is shaking right now because voltage is flickering. OEMs or equipment manufacturers are trying to understand how they should control the thing. New technologies are coming into the market. For example, NV-STATCOM, you could say community scale battery energy storage. These things were not present a few years back, but now pilot projects are being done for those things. So yes, I think digitalization, because more control is required. Electrification, obviously, like in some parts of the world, electrification is still a major challenge right now. In Asian countries, especially, or African countries, they are not 100% electrified. So that's also a major thing that is happening. More and more investments is being poured into the grid regarding that. Other than that, I think it's the boom of AI, because like AI is not just like you could say like it's not just the data centers that require more energy from the grid that gets energy from the grid, but like AI, usage of AI in the power grid itself is a major topic right now. Utilities are using AI to load forecasting, to maintain their to make better plans about their future as well. So I think yes, these three are the major ones, like role of AI, digitization, and the electrification and urbanization trend that are happening in different parts of the world.
Very interesting. And on AI, you talk about load forecasting. I heard about some of the very non-conventional, let's say, approaches as well. I got to know about the utility in the UK using AI, or using satellite imagery, and then using AI to detect areas where vegetation is going to be a problem for the power grid. So I think there are some very unconventional or out of the box solutions when it comes to AI. But AI is going to be used in solving grid's problems, but AI is causing some problems for the grid as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, like the boom of AI, or you could say the data centers, they are like brewing tremendously right now. They are consuming a lot of energy, putting a lot of stress on the grid. I think like according to IEA or Department of Energy forecast, it's like going to take around 1,000 terawatt hour of energy by 2030. That's a huge amount of energy per se. Like, but I would say that it is there, but the problem could be solved using better techniques. Utilities or the end user are more aware of the concept of like how they are going to, you could say, absorb more energy from the grid. So they are better prepared for that as well.
To add, or let's say ask a follow-up question, Safit, as someone who very closely follows what's happening with the new announced, let's say, plan for data centers. I've seen a lot of forecasts, right? So you shared a data point with us. Do you believe that these forecasts are accurate? Do you think they're sort of exaggerated, or do you think they're spot on, and this is what power grid will feel in a few years from now? Or do you think that it's accurate forecasting?
I won't say that it's 100% accurate, but yes, like depending on the current and present scenarios, a forecast are being done depending on the plans that different major data center operators are putting forward. Like for example, Microsoft or Amazon, they are putting a lot of investment into the data center industry. So based on that, it is coming out like there would be a boom. But I think, like as I mentioned earlier, the utilities would be better prepared because data center it's a very big, you could say, like it's a big facility, and if some thing like that this is going to happen, everybody would know about that. So they are prepared. They work very closely with the utility operators as well. They well ahead of time they shared their requirements with the utility so that they could prepare their grid accordingly. Definitely is going to put stress, there's no doubt about that, but like it's, I would say, like now suddenly it happened, that's why there is chaos everywhere. But now with better you could say better prepared behavior, it could be resolved.
Mhm. Right. Uh, I completely uh, forgot that the order of questions was going to be different that I had in my mind. It's difficult to not discuss the burning topics with you, especially who has or who keeps a very close eye on these topics. Let's take a step back. Let's come out of the topic specifically. Let's talk about the research. As I mentioned that for good 8-7 years you have been actually setting up the research base for PTR's Power Grid research, right? So, a few questions that come to my mind. Uh, First, how do you think that this is different from, because you came from academic research background, if I'm not wrong, right? So, how did you feel that it was different, and how do you do it, right? So, as I mentioned earlier, there's a variety of topics that you've covered. I can say this with full confidence that you are one of the champions of creating market models. For those who don't know what the market models are, it's where you're trying to size an opportunity of an equipment which is not very apparent and very easy to, let's say, estimate. But there is some other indicators. For example, you get to know plans about generation from different countries, right? How many gigawatts they are going to inject into the grid, right? So you can use these metrics, which are rather well reported, uh, structurally reported. You can use those to create a model that gives you the forecasting or opportunity sizing for a different thing. For example, transformer or switchgear, right? So, and I say this with full confidence that you have knowledge that I have never seen anywhere in the industry of creating these market models. So first, thank you so much for all the research that you have developed for PTR Saifa. But question that comes to mind is, how does it differ from academic research in your mind? And secondly, what are the top 3 or 4 things that you have to keep in mind when developing these market models in which you specialize?
So, first, I try like to answer the first question: how power grid market research is different from, you could say, academic research, consumer research. Like consumer research is about the customer behavior, like how they sell, buy things, right? And the academic is totally different. You select a niche topic on which research is not conducted before, or something that is like in the literature, so forth. So for power grid research, I would say it's different because it's not about just the research, it's about the technology. You have to understand different nitty-gritties of different technologies. It's, I would say, it's intertwined with your regulatory landscape as well. It's intertwined with how grid dynamics are changing, how people are thinking, even in some cases how climate is changing as well. Because for power grid, when we develop models, it's not just like we take one topic to consider. For example, switchgear. We have to see how switchgear market is evolving. We have to consider each and every factor that could impact the switchgear market in one way or the other. It could be the policies, for example, SF6 ban in EU. That's a huge policy. You could say it has shaken the switchgear industry in European market or in rest of the world as well, where there are no policies in place. Or you have to see the investments that are going into the grid as well. For example, grid expansion that are going to impact the demand for the market as well. So I would say power grid market research, it's all together, like it's a complete package or ecosystem that you have to study. So you have to look into the details of technology itself, how technology is evolving, how grid is evolving, how different demands perspective is changing from end customer, how OEMs are thinking to enter into the market, how regulatory push or regulatory landscape change can impact the market. So all of these things collectively I would say you have to study each and everything to understand the market in detail or to conduct market research for power grid especially. And regarding the models, I would say, as I mentioned, all of these factors which I have mentioned just now, we have to take into account all of these things to develop a model. Models could be like different approaches could be used, like to estimate the market, top-down approach or bottom-up approach could be used. I can give you an example of transformer, for instance. Like transformer is the main core component of electrical grid. It is installed wherever there is a power demand, right? So to understand or estimate the market for transformers, you have to build a model, and how that model is going to be built, you have to take into consideration that how different grid are evolving, how they are expanding, how many substations are coming on it, for instance. Like how many, you could say, is it going to be underground line or overhead lines? Like that would also play an important role in installation of transformer. So I think all of these factors would account in to develop a better model so that you can create a storyline behind the numbers. Like power grid market research is not just the numbers. I would say it's a story you have to tell to your clients as well, like why and when this is going to happen and why it's going to happen. That's very important, I will say.
Very interesting. So essentially, you try to make sure that whatever information is available in terms of like structurally complete information is available, you try to use that, but then you try to look at a lot of these external factors that you talked about, for example, policy, technological, let's say, preferences of the end customers, which in this case would be electric utilities, for example. Other external factors that come to mind are, let's say, grid resilience is a big topic these days, right? So previously, I think it wasn't. So hence, a lot of the equipment preferences were different, right? So now grid resilience is a big topic. So everything now that's like from switchgear to transformer, right? So you have to keep those things in mind, right? Switchgear ban or SF6 ban, sorry, not switchgear, SF6 ban in switchgear industry in Europe. That comes to mind that previously, many years ago, when I remember initial days of my research, it was like, there's regulation that's going to come out and it's going to be a flat out ban. But then the question comes, what are the alternatives, right? So then you witness the entire evolution of this, right? So there wasn't a flat ban. Obviously, you cannot put a flat ban on a piece of technology or equipment that is really running the power grid, right? I remember that you remember that article in Cypher that was written on the use of SS6. I think it was in BBC or maybe some mainstream media. It was called, I think the title was The Dirty Secret of Power Grid Industry. Remember? That's where I think after that there was a lot of noise. But this leads me to a person. I noted this point down. So with you telling our customer or sharing the information with our customer that these are the technological preferences, that's how situation will pan out in the future, right? More often than not, this perspective, it can clash with someone else's perspective. They might have built their own perspective, or they might be expecting different outcome, right? So I know I have gone through many of such conversations where there is a different outcome that was expected, right? So, and this is, by the way, one of the things that sometimes gives market research a bad sort of name as well. That our market research companies, do they act as a mouthpiece for some companies, right? And companies that hold their integrity and they're not sponsored in terms of different topics that they're researching. Obviously, they talk about their research outcomes very openly and very clearly. As long as your methodology is clear, I think you should stick your neck out and really talk about this. There have been many instances where you and I both were involved in customer discussions where the outcome of the study sort of clashed with what the internal perspective was, our opinion, let's say, was. So how do you navigate that? I remember, excuse me, our discussions around SF6. If you remember, that there is two opinions out there, or at that time when the ban was not in place, was that cut off, release like a step function, ban SSX usage completely. Whereas if you remember, we were saying no, it's going to be phased out. You remember that discussion, and we were we were in a lot of heat because of this. And very recently, I'm not sure if you were part of that study where we found out that the ban is next year, and there is still majority of it GIS is what SF6. So it is still like everyone is walking towards it, right? So I remember with our colleague Rafe, right, who takes care of EVCR, EV charging infrastructure research. He has been in many conversations with a couple of years ago when things looked very rosy from the outside for e-mobility, whereas we were saying, there could be some barriers. We were given, let's say, feedback that no, your forecast is too pessimistic. No. And when things started to go, off track, which we knew, and it's not that we, again, people say it's all the crystal ball. No, it's all, I think, sci-fi. It's all probabilities. You have to calculate the probabilities, right? You look at policies, for instance. You look at things which are sort of adding inertia to a market, and you calculate the probability that if this thing is taken out of the equation, will that inertia decay very quickly, or is this a self-sustaining thing, right? So we were at that time, for e-mobility example, we knew that there is definitely support from the outside, and we knew that right now this industry without that support will shape, and that's what you were predicting. But we, in many cases, people accepted and agree with our forecasting, but in many cases they did not. I'm sure you have been in your fair share of these such discussions. How do you navigate this? What is the best way to put your perspective about it? You then talk about that, hey, this is the methodology through which I'm calculating this scenario, right? At the end of the day, you're also looking at a forecast scenario. I am also looking at a forecast scenario. Let's compare our methodologies. Is that the best approach in these instances? Because I know you have been in many of such discussions over the past few years.
Yeah, you're right. Like there are many discussions where like our stance clash with the client's stance. So as I mentioned, that the transparency is the rule over there. Like just share your methodology and your sources, like from where you, based on which factors you are taking the forecast would look like. What if scenario if the forecast changes? For example, like you know that last year or a year before, US scenario is totally different. Lot of investment being poured into the grid. Everything is there is very, you could say, optimistic scenario for the US market. But like with the political change, you have seen that the things have changed 360-degree. There were tariffs, there were certain restrictions on different countries. So if you are transparent about your methodology, you are explaining to the client that why we think the market would look like this, and what factors are behind our numbers. Like as I said earlier, like market research for power grid especially is not just about the numbers, it's the complete nuances. You have to explain the complete story behind the number, why you think the numbers would change. What is this number, for example, like if gigawatts, for example, gigawatt is one of the factor. Instead of 100 gigawatts, your forecast is driven on 100 gigawatts because that's the country target. But the country achieved that like well ahead of time. Obviously, the demand would change, the thing would change drastically. So these are some factors, something that you have to put forward in front of the client. And if still client is not convinced with your approach, or you can sit down and like find a middle ground. We can understand their perspective.
Maybe yeah, there is some hidden information which we were unable to sort of understand. Supply side, Saifa, you didn't mention supply side. I think that's a big part of the equation. People forget. I give you an example. In the early days of EVCR research, when I was more involved than our colleagues, in one of the discussions, we were told, "What are you talking about? The electric bus forecast in the US should be 10x than what you have right now." I did a quick search, surface level, to find out what is the manufacturing capacity of electric buses in US and areas from which US was imported. It could not produce that 10x forecast that was like, so you cannot close your eyes and say that the supply side is not going to pay. If you see what's happening with transformers, right? So when supply side is not able to match the demand, things halt basically. So definitely you have to look at the supply side and obviously the entire policy landscape. I agree. Put your methodology very openly that this is how we came to this conclusion. The other side, then you also explain that how do you get to this? Is it just because you want to see this outcome, or is it that there is a rationale behind it? If there is a rationale, I think we should. We always do that, right? We sit down and we try to understand that okay, this is where you are coming from, and the middle ground, I would say, in that case would be that maybe the some of the policies that we could not figure out or we could not find out, they are going to play a role, and then we will end up taking that into consideration in our forecasting as well. Saifa, another topic that comes to mind, I know we have switched between the topics of power grid and then back to research. We have one last topic of discussion on actually conducting the research. There are some topics or areas, let's say, which I feel are far more complicated than others, right? So how do you differentiate? So when a request comes to you, right? How do you evaluate it? That are you going to use, let's say, top-down methodology, bottom-up methodology? Should you be considering external factors? Should you be considering only internal factors? In what depth can we go while conducting this research? How do you dissect a request that comes to you on your table from a customer on Power Grid? And walk us through from the very complex ones to easy ones. How do you sort of understand and then sit down and do what you do best, which is creating a methodology that how my researchers are going to conduct this research, and methodology that you convince our customers is good enough. So how do you go about this entire process?
So, I would say scoping is very important on this scenario because, like, when client come to us, sometimes it's very vague request. They just want to understand the market. They don't know what they are looking for. So, to ask the right questions at the right time to give direction to the client, sometimes is very important for us at Web because we have to do the scoping based on scoping. Sometimes the request is very fragmented, you could say. It's all over the place. They want the market size, they want the demand, they want projects as well. So, being a researcher, I have experience of what is available and what we can't do, like what's out of our capability. And I would say that client usually respect this honesty as well, that if you just mention that it's not something doable. Coming back to the discussion that we were having, so as I mentioned, like asking the right questions, scoping is very important. And also to understand the major reason why they want this research. What's the main purpose or goal of the research is also important. Once we have that scoping with us, then we sit down, we try to understand the market dynamics. Like for instance, like if I talk about the LV switchgear, it's a very fragmented market. You could find LV switchgear even in apartment buildings, like big residential. So that's very fragmented. You can't go and track each and every residential customer and see that how many switchgears are being installed, right? So here, where there is very less to no information available, we'll offer top-down methodology. We'll offer the factors that could help you to estimate the market more appropriately. For example, the macroeconomic indicators, how much capex like GDP, you could say or how that market is evolving. So those factors are important. However, on the or contrary, the topics which are very niche, which have very defined applications. In other words, for example, like transformers. We know that transformers are not going to be installed in residential customers. Like the residential customers are not going to need transformer. It's always the utility who have to install the transformer. So where we know the applications, where we know how things are being played, how market is structured, so we go forward with the bottom-up methodology over there, which can be easily tracked, for which we can find the information. Because I said earlier that we have to present that sources of information to the client as well, to keep the transparency and to keep the trust in between. So there we'll offer, you could say, the bottom-up methodology, And obviously, like the forecast is based on different factors, how policies are changing, how macroeconomics are being driven, or how investments are being poured into the grid. So based on certain factors, or like the structure of the market or structure of the product we are trying to understand, it's depend on that mostly. And definitely before we start the execution of the project, we openly share that methodology with the client to get them on board that this is how we are going to estimate the market. And towards the end, like if I'm talking just about the secondary research so far, it's not just the secondary that we take into account. We also speak with the experts in the market as well. Because primary, without primary, there is, you could say, like you always miss something. Some points are all.
Oh yeah, you're in your own bubble and you're not listening to experts on ground. So obviously,
So we try to speak with the experts on ground who have like years of experience, decades of experience with that technology, with that thing, how they see the market. Is there anything that we are missing, and they see it at the very important point. So we did take into account that, and towards the end, like there were like feedback sessions with the client internally as well to to double check the market estimate, for double check the story that we have built. And once we are fully comfortable and 100% confident that this is what we see the market and this is how the market is out there, we delivered it to the client. If still there is something missing, or if client has some other feedback, definitely that's going to be, you could say, like one-on-one correspondence with the client, back and forth could happen.
you see. Right. And I just wrote an article. I should have. I don't know if you saw it or not. Should have been published by now. I had scheduled it today earlier in the morning. And that's what I'm talking about in that article. That there is different delivery mechanisms through which market research is delivered, and it's very important for the buyer side to ask the right questions to the sell side, right? And you know that when it comes to syndicated research, there is a lot of companies out there who claim to be doing in-depth research, but we know that's not the case. So in that parties, I've shared that what are different ways folks who are thinking about buying market research, what questions should they be asking? You know, things like if someone comes to you, right, and they ask you about your credentials, what makes you the expert in Power BI, right? You can show them 50 of your thought pieces, your conversations, your conversation with the experts. You can show them the credentials of tens of projects that you've done on Power Grid, on the methodology that you've developed, right? So in that thought piece, I say that ask the vendor that can you show me those type of credentials or not, right? And in some cases, this is a good way of understanding if someone has the right capability or not. All right, moving towards another topic completely unrelated to the use of let's say AI in Power Grid. I want to understand the use of AI and automation in market research. So, but actually, let's take a step back. How do you see that the methods of doing market research, like a B2B, obviously we're talking about B2B here, especially in the context of Power Grid, we talked about like how diligence is extremely important, and that's where our expertise of having people with technical background knowledge, know-how, we have them actually working on the research. So we are covering that part. Another law that we talk about at PTR always following is digestibility, which you also talked about earlier, that you sit down with the customer as well to make sure that the information is utilized, right? In terms of the methods, right? How do you see that it has evolved? And then maybe finish your thought by talking about the use of AI as well.
So I would say that in terms of the research method, the core methodology is the same, that we do secondary, we do primary, we understand what's the client requirement, that's there. But overall, you could say like it's has evolved tremendously. Like I would say like AI, the role of AI in the research especially is very important. It has streamlined the process. It has made the process more efficient. Earlier, like 4 or 5 years back, I sat down, I downloaded a report and I skimmed through it like spending pretty good amount of time, like couple of hours on it, to extract few data points that I need for my research, right? But now using the AI tool, I would say that it has helped me to skim through that document more efficiently, it can scan that document like within couple of minutes or maybe like few seconds as well in some cases, and it can extract the relevant information that you get, right? So, other than that, I would say that like within PTR, the Mato, the tool that we have introduced, that I would say like it's a very incredible tool because like it could scan it could extract hidden information from somewhere. I know, I remember the time when I have to skim through like 6, 7 pages of first Google just to get one data point.
Data point.
But now using the Matos tool or the AI automation, again, AI is playing a role over there. Like the automation tool, you just simply give them a command and they can extract the data for you. They can scrape the data from different places for you, right? And if I talk about the AI, because like it's a common buzzword right now that AI can replace human easily with multiple jobs. So I think like it can make the processes more efficient, but it will not replace us considering you can get the data. You even in some cases it can help you build the hypothesis as well. But to synthesize the data, to make it humanly contextual, to make it easily understandable, to make it not like sound like a robot, or you could say to connect the dots between different things, I think still researchers or analysts would be required to do that job. So it's a two-way process. Like it helps to make the job better, but it's not going to replace sooner.
So AI is not going to replace. AI is going to replace those analysts and researchers who are not using AI to do their work.
Yeah, I will be, because like that you could say like that impacts your efficiency. If you have the facility, if you have the leverage to utilize something that can improve your work and can help you to do the work in a better and most efficient way, why not? Why should we not use that?
Right. And towards the end, when you have, so essentially all the tasks which are repetitive in nature, you can automate that. And we're doing that, as you mentioned, through Matos. We already, that's the vision, that our researchers and analysts should not be spending time on something that is repetitive, something which it's a tedious work. It's just, you going through loads of documents and, information just to get 2, 3, 4 relevant data points that you need. And we always go to those depths, right? Because connecting with the earlier thoughts of diligence, right? All the models that we're building, the inputs that go into those models, we always have sourcing behind it, right? So it's imperative, it's important for us that we continue to do that, but using AI, it's much more, it's faster, basically. You can do this process in a much faster way. I mean, you think that this will then improve the time, essentially? One's ability to conduct and deliver research is definitely will improve. And I think it will then allow people who are working on execution of this research to focus on more important tasks, which you have been saying from the get-go, so since sat down, that connecting the dots, creating a story. Because if it's not a story, then no one is able to digest that information. No one is going to be able to use that market research to create their own, let's say, strategy, for example, if that's what they're using the research for. We have to wrap it up, Saifa. Coming back to the key topics of Power Grid, we talked about digitalization, we talked about usage of AI, for instance. Moving forward, let's say short to or medium to long term, how do you think, like, what are the major changes that we should expect in Power Grid? Is it going to be the continuation of these topics, or do you think completely different new fields? And I'll give you maybe one example. I don't know if you saw a thought that I shared a couple of days ago, I think. And you definitely would remember those times when we were asked to do research on solid state transformers. Remember, we used to say, no chance, because we had our reason, and the reason was, very, very expensive. But what was the price point that I remember? It was 5x more expensive a solid state transformer compared to a normal conventional transformer. Right? So we never showed a positive outlook. Well, short-term positive outlook for solid state transformers. But now I see that changing, and the reason for that was there was an acquisition that was announced by Eaton of a company that makes there. If you go to the website, that the website says they're making EV chargers,
Yeah.
but they also make solid state transformers for EV. I mean, assuming that's how the evolution happened, that they were making solid state transformers, but EV chargers. I know another company that has gone through the exact same path. They Their business model was that they had EV chargers which are most compact in terms of the footprint, and the reason was that they were using solid state transformers. There was a big investment announced for that company a few months ago. I think I'm maybe mixing the timelines, and this acquisition happened. And then I know another company that is focusing on solid state transformers as well, and it's probably going to be. I think they're going for getting acquired as well. Their technology is a little bit different. It uses the magnetic concrete, I think. That the purpose of discussing this was that this is a technology that a few years ago we said no chance, but now things are changing. And big factor here is the or let's say the issues that the conventional transformers are facing, right? In the discussion, I also referred to us doing. You remember we used to write Porter's 5 forces analysis, right? For transformer, we always said no chance of substitution, right? What was the name of this aspect called? The threat of substitution in Porter's 5 forces analysis, right? And we'd always say no chance. We used to give it one
Just score.
yeah, or lowest possible score, meaning that no chance. Like, what are you going to replace conventional transformers with? But now I think we need to update this, and it is not going to be one anymore. So, looking at the future, what are the top things that come to your mind in terms of medium and maybe also long term in power grid?
I think the most important phenomena for which different companies are getting on board as well is the virtualization, the concept of virtualization. I think that's going to be the future sooner or later. Not just like it's going to be a long term, because like we have been seeing like since the start of my career in research, I have been seeing that how grid is evolving, how control of the grid is evolving. With and all of these factors are playing into its role into the evolution of the grid, like penetration of renewables, EVs, bidirectional flow of electricity, all those things. The control right now is first like it's centralized, then they decentralized, and now they are again moving towards, I would say, the centralized control, moving towards virtualization. What's the concept of virtualization is all you could say a virtual machine controlling your grid right now. So I think that's the future right now, which I see going to happen, and it's not a very it's a new phenomena for, you could say, the end user, but like the researchers like us who are doing the research around this technology, or the companies who are exploring the potential of this technology. You can name. I think few days back you have heard that you might have heard that GE announced their grid portfolio. What is that? Like it's a step towards moving towards the virtualization. All other tier one that are thinking in this way, or you could say like they are moving towards it direction.
The industry.
So modern problems need modern solutions as well. So yeah, I think it's been one of the major thing that comes to my mind when I think about future of the grid right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Saifa. Thank you for your time. And thank you to our listeners and viewers as well. I'm sure that this was an episode where you got a sneak peek of how PTR conducts the research. You got to meet one of our brilliant team leads, researcher who actually sets up the entire research. And you also got to hear about her perspective about what does she think about in terms of key topics that are going to impact the power pixel feature. I hope you got a lot of insights from this episode, and I'll get you in the next one. Thank you so much.